Welcome to the 13th Istanbul Fashion Conference organized with Bloomberg HT sponsorship. Due to the pandemic this year, we're having this as online, and you can follow it on Business HT and Business HT on all of the media. Now we have a very interesting session which is named maybe we'll A new tomorrow starts today. This is a bit of a linguistically dense session. Let's just start moving for tomorrow. That's the message that we get from today. The new normal era, how to manage the instability. And we have Centric Software's Mr. Christopher Terry, and we also have Ronnie Jane from Cape Union Mart, along with Christoph Terry from Centric Software. Welcome to our session.
Merhaba. That's about as far as my Turkish can go. It's a great opportunity to be with all of you today and to be here with my dear friend Renee. I will be asking her in a moment about what the new normal is all about and what the new normal means for all of us. So just as a way of introduction, my name is Christoph. I run the sales organization in Europe for Centric Software. Centric Software is the leader for PLM, product lifecycle management solutions for the footwear, apparel, retail, and consumer goods businesses. We are about 400 customers in the world, and we serve many different verticals, but we always try to help our customers to deliver products faster to the market with more quality and with less cost. And today, let me introduce you to Renee. I will actually let you do your own introduction, Renee, because no one else does it as best as you can, as you do.
Good morning, Christoph. Actually, I think it's a good afternoon for everybody on the call. I'm calling you from Cape Town, South Africa, so lovely to be with everybody in Istanbul. I am the Enterprise Application Manager for Cape Union Mart. That means, in a nutshell, that I look after all of the systems, the IT systems for everything that is to do with planning, buying, and the supply chain all the way into the back office for stores. And I have been working at Cape Union Mart now for the past 2 years, and the big job I have ahead of me here is to replace all of the systems they have with something beautiful, new, shiny, and modern, and I started with our PLM.
Thank you, Renee. And I'm calling you from France, and something that we have in common right now, and I think unfortunately with many other countries in the world, is that we are going through travel restrictions, we are going through lockdowns, and I think the one in South Africa has been extremely harsh. So can you share with us maybe, in your own experience working with that Cape Union Mart, what is it today now to look for manufacturers, for suppliers? How do you do that possibly different today from what you were doing yesterday before the pandemic?
Absolutely, Christoph. We went into harsh lockdown here in South Africa in March, late March. I'm sure most people have heard we probably had one of the harshest lockdowns in the world, quite frankly. Overnight, we literally had to move from our offices into our homes, and we're no longer allowed to travel at all. And that included locally. We were not allowed to travel locally. And we have been in that same position now for the past 6 months almost, as you all are. And only now, this past week, did we open up the borders for the first time to allow some small level of airline travel, but it's very, very restricted. And so overnight, the buying teams and the planning teams who had been so very used to being able to work in a very connected way with each other, with their suppliers, and specifically with the product, suddenly had to move home, where they lost physical contact with the product. So you can imagine that the range review rooms just stood empty with all the product sitting in it. And they could no longer fly overseas to be working directly with their suppliers and the manufacturers. And more importantly, they couldn't work directly with each other. So even just that day-to-day connectivity was lost in a heartbeat. And suddenly everybody had to learn how to Zoom or had to learn how to Skype or had to learn how to whatever mechanism we all started using. And it was a crazy first few weeks. And we effectively lost a trading period because for the first 3 or 4 weeks, we were in effect learning just to work learning just to work from home. And that extended itself all the way from working with the person sitting next to me who I would be used to just turning to and having a quick chat about something or showing something on a screen or checking a quantity of a PO or whatever it might be, to walking into my review room and feeling a garment, checking a garment, checking measurements, etc., to flying overseas to working directly with my supplier in their manufacturing and factories, wherever they might be, to now suddenly having to do that all on Zoom, which it was all exciting in the beginning and we were all like, oh, wow, this is so cool. Everybody's on Zoom. But you know what? It's just not the same. And what we experienced was everything slowed right down. Decisions took so much longer to make. And that ability to judge a garment and to judge your supplier in a face-to-face and a real way was lost in a heartbeat. And what we found very quickly was that the buying teams lost confidence in their decisions. So the experience in the beginning of lockdown for all of us was moving into home, suddenly having to work out how to work on Zoom, and then not being able to do the job in the way that you used to be able to do it. And the confidence in making buying decisions was almost lost overnight because now people who had been used to feeling a garment and being with a supplier in their factory, that whole process was gone and was reliant now on a bunch of WhatsApp messages or a Zoom call where the connectivity was dropping all the time and having to sort of gaze down at what you could see on the screen with your supplier trying to show your garment, but really it's not the same thing as you can imagine. And then the second big stumbling block for us there was that we work with a lot of really quite small suppliers, specifically in India and China, and their connectivity is almost non-existent. And their ability to start communicating to us in an online platform was very, very limited. And so what we immediately experienced was that if we were saying to them, get on a Zoom with us, they didn't have Zoom. And if we were saying to them, can you please connect to us over the internet, they simply just didn't have the connectivity. And very quickly, we had to learn how to curtail our supplier listing down to those who could communicate to us over Zoom, who could communicate to us in a relatively realistic way through showing garments on screen, etc. And that really threw the lights out for all of us very, very quickly because it's disconcerting when you lose confidence in being able to make buying decisions. It's even more disconcerting if you can't use the suppliers that you'd been reliant on for so many years because they can't communicate through Zoom or being online in a COVID world. So those were the big challenges that we had straight into COVID.
Yeah, thank you very much, Renee. So I think what you're saying is fascinating in the sense that online communication has now become a selection criteria, I guess, for selecting proper suppliers to you. So how would you say that using a PLM such as C8, which is the product you're using today, the solution you're using today, has helped you to overcome some of those challenges? Do you have any good story around that?
Yeah, we, as I was saying before, the buyers would just sit next to each other and chit-chat next to each other and get, their day job done by just being next to each other. And when we went offline, well, online, however you want to call that, when we went home, what we started to do immediately was rely a lot more on the application sets that we had to hand. And first things, all the application sets that are cloud-based were a huge tick in the box for us because it didn't require somebody to be on a VPN and then get them set up on VPNs that they'd never used before. They literally could just get an internet connection and be straight into the application suite. So for us, we had a huge tick in the box straight away with PLM, Centric PLM, because it's cloud-based and the connectivity was immediate. It was just there. The second thing we started doing, and I didn't actually suggest this to my buying team. They just started doing it more themselves, was working inside of the PLM system to talk to each other. So we started seeing that people were leaving comments on things that they'd never done before. We started seeing that people were sending URLs to each other to say, quickly have a look at this style for me, quickly have a look at this thing over here. We started seeing that people were relying more and more on being in the PLM to support their communication. And that wasn't something we had really expected at all out of our use of Centric PLM. It just sort of happened because people needed to find ways to communicate with each other that was inside of the application that they were sitting in. And we found, as an extension of that, that we have factories ourselves. Cape Union Mart has 3 factories where we make our own clothing. And up until this point, the factories hadn't been online in PLM. It had always been through, a buyer would take their laptop and literally go to the factory and sit there and show them PLM. And a few days after lockdown, I got a request to please put all the factory users straight into PLM. And we did a real quick crash course on Zoom, of course, a real quick crash course on how to use PLM in the factories. And the next minute I could see the factories were now starting to post images and measurements and shape information, tech pack information, even to the point where they're putting patterns into PLM for the first time in an effort to actually start communicating with the buyers much more clearly. So it was a process that kind of happened without us even designing it. But it happened because it's so easy inside of the PLM. I literally, like I said, I did a Zoom training for everybody in PLM, and it was, I think it must have been about a half-hour training. It was just like how to get into Centric PLM. Here are the screens you need to get to. And the next minute, everybody was in it and working online straight away with each other in this very communicative way, which I hadn't expected and anticipated with going into lockdown. We'd said them before lockdown, you can do comments, you can load up pictures, you can actually communicate to each other through using the workflow in PLM. And they were like, yeah, sure, it's not really necessary because I just sit right next to the person or I go to the factory itself. But obviously with lockdown, they were forced to. And the really good news was it was so easy for them to just do that. The same thing happened to a degree with our suppliers. The suppliers are not online in PLM itself, but we started being able to communicate a lot more through the PLM itself directly to them out of PLM. And that's also just happened almost by accident, if you will, because of lockdown. So we've really extended the use of PLM into our broader communities here at Cape Union Mart and really just stepped into using it in a much more communicative way rather than just being a place to hold a style and a quote.
Very clear. So I guess you just gave us a crash course on digital transformation, applied to the pragmatism of the pandemic. Thank you very much, Renee. This was quite enjoyable to talk to you again, and I'm looking forward, once the borders finally open, to share a couple of bottles of wines with you, whether it is South African or French. Thank you very much.
Super. Thanks so much, Christoph. Lovely seeing you again.